In this video, we discussed Advanced Higher Biology Unit 2, Organisms and Evolution, specifically Key Area 1, Field Techniques for Biologists, Subsection E, Measuring and Recording Animal Behaviour. We'll explain how animal behaviour is quantified, give the features and uses of an ethogram, and discuss the implications of anthropomorphism. Ethology is the study of animal behaviour. An ethogram is a recording of all of the observed behaviour shown by a species or individual over a particular period of time. So observed behaviours are recorded as descriptions, for example, eating, having their head up, lying down, tail wagging, rather than by trying to infer what those intentions mean. So for example, the wolf looked happy, the elephant turned to communicate. Here we see an example of an ethogram for an African wild dog. So we can see when it's resting behaviour, the description we're looking for is lying on the ground inactive, tail lowered, tail below, horizontal at times between back legs. This enables different researchers to use the same ethogram and gather data. Some of the measurements used to quantify animal behaviour are latency, frequency, and duration. So latency is the time between a stimulus occurring and the response behaviour. So if, for example, a warning call was given by a sentry in a large group of meerkats, that would be a stimulus, and then you could calculate latency period before the group reacted. Frequency is the number of times a behaviour occurs within an observation period, and duration is the length of time each behaviour occurs for during the observation period. When we combine some of this together, we can look at what's called a time budget, in which we see the proportion of time spent completing each of these different behavioural activities in an ethogram. So 44% of time was spent observing, 15% of time eating, 8% of time drinking. There was no time spent sleeping, 11% of the time swimming, etc., etc. It's interesting, you can use an ethogram to compare things like how behaviours change with population size. If you studied wild geese, you would find that as population size increases, the amount of time each particular individual needs to spend being vigilant, so observing for predators, is decreased. So this is a very important finding from that study. Anthropomorphism. When working closely with animals, it's very easy to fall into the trap of attributing complex behaviours and thoughts and human needs onto them. This is known as anthropomorphism. It's important that we avoid this, as it can lead to us making invalid conclusions due to our preconceived ideas. It's very common in animal training to think that the dog can understand the commands that are being given. A lot of the time it is tone and particular key words that they use to understand what actions they're expected to complete. So some of the measurements used to quantify animal behaviour are latency, frequency, and duration. Latency is the time between the stimulus occurring and the response behaviour. Frequency being the number of times a behaviour occurs in an observation period. Duration being the length of time the behaviour occurs for during the observation period. An ethogram of the behaviour shown by a species in a wild context allows the construction of a time budget. An ethogram lists specific behaviours to be observed and recorded in the study. Recording the duration of each of these behaviours in the ethogram, together with the total time of observation, allows the proportion of time spent on each behaviour to be calculated in a time budget. The importance of avoiding anthropomorphism when analysing behaviour is that if we anthropomorphise the animals, we end up with invalid conclusions.